All right, thank you so much for bearing with us. We had a couple of technical difficulties with the stream. So thank you all, and to those who are here in person, and to those who are watching online, welcome to Esports and Education, a showcase of the ED Games Expo. My name is Elizabeth Newberry, and I'm the director of the Serious Games Initiative here at the Wilson Center. My colleagues often say I have the privilege of having one of the coolest job titles in DC. The Wilson Center was founded by Congress in 1968 as the official memorial to President Woodrow Wilson. We are the nation's top nonpartisan policy forum for addressing global issues through independent research and open dialogue that produces actionable ideas. We are a non-advocacy ideas factory. Nearly a decade ago, the Wilson Center became a leader in game-based approaches in the federal government through the founding of the Serious Games Initiative. We make topics normally confined to pundit discussions and very long policy briefs accessible to everyone with a desire to learn. We develop and research games around such key policy issues as coastal resilience, ocean plastics, which I have the honor of working with my colleague Jennifer Turner at the China Environment Forum on, and yes, even such riveting topics as the federal budget. Don't believe me? Check out FiscalShip at fiscalship.org. We actually did make a game about the federal budget. We've actually made 3. This current rendition is in partnership with Brookings Institution, and it's a game designed to help people understand federal budget policy and challenge players to reduce national debt while still having fun. So it's been played by 500,000 people around the world, and likely more than have read a policy brief about the federal budget. Needless to say, games can have a huge impact. Fortunately, the Wilson Center does not stand alone in this charge to make learning fun. I am pleased to join other government agencies around events like the ED Games Expo that support the ecosystem of educational games. The ED Games Expo is the Department of Education's annual public showcase and celebration of educational learning games, as well as innovative forms of learning technologies for children and students in education and special education. For those who want to continue the game learning fun, it takes place tonight at the Kennedy Center at 5 p.m., the Kennedy Center being the other living memorial to a U.S. president. So if you're interested in seeing 150 learning games and technologies demoed, I would head over there. But first, we're going to talk about esports. We all know that games are not going anywhere, and it's time we take a closer look at a rapidly growing industry. One slice of the gaming industry that has been growing exponentially is the topic we are here to talk about today, esports. Esports, or competitive video game play, is where video games are played in a highly competitive atmosphere, much akin to sports, hence e-sport, electronic sports. Now projected to bring $1 billion USD revenue this year with tournament viewerships that challenge many professional sports, esports is not just big, it's huge. Esports has fundamentally changed the way many audiences approach games, and it is a global phenomenon, oftentimes called the national sport of such places like South Korea. And yet, despite its popularity, esports is still very much a wild, wild west, particularly here in the United States. Across sectors, esports is still trying to figure out what it looks like. Today, we'll look a little bit closer about some people who are trying to pave those pathways within the US context. But we need to ask the questions of what are the workforce opportunities and what are the academic opportunities arising in esports. To address this, we have brought together a wealth of different perspectives here today, from local community approaches to esports professional teams, economists to college professors, students, and administrators. In just a moment, I will have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Casey Sachs, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Community Colleges at the U.S. Department of Education, who will provide some welcoming remarks. Then we will begin with a keynote from Professor Ellen M. Zavian to address the lay of the land, so you don't have to be a professional esports guru to be in this room or on this webcast. And she will outline the ecosystem of esports. We will then go to a panel on the economics of esports, with case examples that show the nuances of what esports ecosystem looks like and the business innovation occurring in this space. And finally, we will hear from 2 colleges who are tackling the question of how to engage in esports in an academic setting. As shown here, there are many different ways to quote unquote do esports. My hope is that by listening to this wealth of perspectives, you can see not just what is happening, but what the potentials are in this space. Without further ado, I will pass the mic to Dr. Casey Sachs, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Community Colleges, U.S. Department of Education, and she will provide a nice welcome. Thank you.
Liz gets the coolest title, and I get the longest one. Great to be with you all here today. Thank you so much for having me. So you heard from Liz that the Department of Education is interested in esports, so that's sort of interesting. And I know why we're interested. It's because this is such a tremendous opportunity to be able to reach a different group of students, a group of students who might not be engaged with some of our traditional learning models, a group of students who might already be thinking about playing esports or who are really into gaming. And so the idea of being able to leverage something that students are already interested in and really connect that to any number of forms of learning is where we see this potential. And so the department has sponsored the ED Games because we really want to build that capacity. We want to be able to connect developers to researchers. We want to connect stakeholders. We want students to come in and demo things so we can see how they're actually using them in an organic environment. So the ED Games are really fun. Last year, one of my favorite parts that I already shared with my fellow panelists this morning was getting to perform virtual surgery on someone's knee. And it's great because you put on the VR glasses and you're cutting on someone and you nick an artery and then you have a problem and you have to fix the problem. And it's realistic enough that even I was like, you know, there's a good reason that I'm not this kind of doctor because it's not for me. But that's an incredibly valuable learning opportunity for someone who thinks, gosh, maybe I do want to be a doctor and what would that experience be like? So even to have the virtual experience, you're still learning what that experience could be, and I didn't even have to hurt someone's real knee. So it is just incredible what we can see in this space and what's possible. It's certainly a long way from, and this dates me, you know, competitive Mario Kart in your dorm room, and you'll certainly hear more about what this space looks like and the number of students who are competing. I'm a little certainly out of my element when my team this week said, oh great, you're gonna go talk to a group who's interested in esports. You need to know about Twitch, you need to know about League of Legends, you need to go online, you need to watch these things. They had me read Pt.1, so I feel like I'm totally up to date now. But it's incredible because even Pt.1 really addresses the educational opportunities that exist in the space. They talk about virtual schools, they talk about virtual learning, they talk about these communities where students can really work together and solve problems and figure out new inventions and new ideas and new ways to help our world and to grow and to develop themselves. And that's really the idea from the Department of Education, that we want people to really take these platforms and these opportunities to grow and to develop and to learn something. So that's why the Department of Education is interested in the ED Games and why I'm here and why we're all so engaged with the space. I'm certainly excited this morning to learn from our two panels, both talking about the economic impact and the future educational opportunities. You get to hear from some experts who have really thought through what are the implications. We heard this is a $1 billion industry, and so that's something to pay attention to, something that's growing this quickly and that's generating that much revenue that also has this educational potential is an area that I'm certainly engaged with and interested in and want to learn from all of you. So thank you for being here. Thank you to our panelists, and I'm excited to hear and learn more from you. Thanks.
And also, as a slight administrative note and new media geek, I should point out very gently that there is a hashtag if you are in the room and would like to be tweeting, hashtag ED Games Expo or tag at WilsonStip, S-T-I-P. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Professor Ellen M. Zavian, Professor of Sports Law at GW and GW Law, and the Editor-in-Chief of Esports and the Law, who will provide a keynote address around the overall ecosystem of esports, and who has lent her expertise to some of the potential regulatory impacts that intersect with this growing industry. Professor Zavian.
Thank you very much, Liz. Pleasure to be here. Will I have a clicker to move up? Here it is. Technology at its most basic. Okay. Start with the first slide, yeah. So first, I want to say thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited, and when they first came to me, I was like, what are you doing, and why is the government involved in this, and so forth. And my husband works for Department of Defense, so he was, what are you doing? So it's always weird when my husband's job and my job converge a little, right? So first thing, I'm here as an educator, and I'm hoping to bring everybody to a parallel position. So when we have the experts come on, that we can understand some of their vocab and where they're going and so forth. But most importantly, I'm not just an educator, I'm a parent. And my son, who is the prime age of an esports athlete, is a breakdancer and a skateboarder. But he also plays esports. And although he lives in a household with 2 knowledgeable parents on privacy and data collection, and I sit on the Safe Tech Committee in Montgomery County here on Safe Tech, I think the components of how one learns is critical, particularly in the special ed space, where my mother taught, and how she would have utilized these tools to invigorate and really stimulate a lot of her students back in the 60s and 70s. So I think we're living in a really extraordinary area. But I also think as a parent, we need to look at this as this is a tool, not the tool. And that is a tool in the educational toolbox. And so if we can put that in sort of perspective on why we go through this, and we have very exciting people to talk about it, we definitely view this as one component of the educational system. Okay, so I was asked to really bring forth what are the different levels within the educational system, and what are we going to talk about today after I speak. So I'm not sure how to. Okay.
This I can do. We hope. Yes, there we go.
Okay, so this is what happens on e-games when you don't have a good Wi-Fi connection, according to my son, or it's lagging, okay? But it's we can go to the next video because I don't want to. Yeah, so I'm going to make the noise. Back when I was growing up, we played Pong. And Pong was definitely our e-game of the sort. No sound, so. Oh. We would spend afternoons playing this over and over. But more importantly, I would watch my brother and sister who were older and would confiscate the game. So I would watch them play. And when you think about that, that's what our kids are doing. They're watching other people play the game so they can learn skills and have better skills to advance themselves. Okay.
I'm curious
Thank
how
you.
long we would all sit here.
Exactly.
All right. Some of us don't know. She can just click the next slide. Right? You just click the next slide.
I'm trying to do that.
Let it keep coming. Sorry.
Okay. So just talking about when I first went to an esports event, I was like, why are these people watching somebody else play? And then I realized, oh, that's what I did when I was watching my siblings play Pong. So it's not such a strange thing. If you go to a football game, you're watching people play a game that you don't even play. Okay, when I was representing NFL players, I always got told, you've never been on the field, you've never had equipment on, you've never. Well, could you imagine if the fans actually played the game, how much more engaged they would be? And that's what esports is doing at the pro level. The people that are coming to these games are engaged and learning from these games. When I took my son to an esports event in Chicago, when he came back, he advanced his level considerably just by watching these kids play at the event. So I shouldn't say kids. Some of them are minors. But so what does it look like? And when you look at this concept of, is it a sport? Is it not a sport? I mean, my son plays golf and people tell him that's not a sport, it's a skill. And in the beginning of my sports law class, I talk about how do you define a sport. We never come to a good definition. So I think the real thing that you want to think about is one is a physical sport primarily, and one is a mind sport primarily. But they both engage each other, right? So you still have to have the mind in the physical side, and you still have to have the vice versa, right? So look at it from an e-gamer standpoint. What is that person? And if you see the evolution of professional e-gamers, they are looking at developing their physical side. They're actually doing yoga. They're working out. There's trainers now specifically gearing up in this space. So don't look for it just as, hey, you're sitting in a chair for 8 hours not doing anything. So this is my sort of clear definition of what a gamer is. And so we're all on the same page. What does the ecosystem look like around the gamer? If you look very specifically, one thing I learned after talking to some e-gamers was that, hey, I am skilled in X position. Well, coming from football, I was like, well, wait a minute. You mean there's a wide receiver, a defensive back, and a quarterback? And they said, yes, exactly. They are specifically skilled in a certain area for that game, and they hold that position on that team. So some are better in defense, some are better in offense. So don't think of it as, hey, they're playing the whole game at such an expert level. They each have a skill set. The age group is varying. Some kids are going as a minor from 16-year-olds up, particularly in China and some other countries. But I think the pro level where the sweet spot is and where you've developed skills is still in that 19 to 25 age. So who are the stakeholders in this space? We can talk about lots of stakeholders at the pro level. Today, we're going to be talking about stakeholders in the educational space of e-gaming. So just so everyone understands, this is no different than a list I would put up for the NFL. I mean, there are absolute stakeholders in every space. So if you dive down a little deeper, you can begin to understand who are the publishers. And think of the publishers as the owners of the intellectual property. That is the big difference between esports and traditional sports. Nobody owns the game of football. Nobody owns the game of baseball. We could all go out and play a game of baseball and not ask permission from anyone if we could use the rules and use the field and have a diamond and have a ball. This is not the case. And look for this area in the legal area to be an area that's going to grow exponentially because it's that IP that's so critical to the publishers and developers. These are the different stakeholders when you look at it across the board. So when you hear the panelists talk about ESL or Sony or IMG in this space, you can get a better understanding of who are the players, and these players are big players in all other sports. And then where are we viewing this? As we heard, Twitch is one of the spaces that are viewing it, but obviously viewership is very large in this area because that's where the advertisement and the revenue comes in. And then lastly, what networks are looking in this space and what other platforms. I think in the next few years, we're going to see a lot of mergers and development from larger traditional spaces as well, like networks like NBC and CBS and so forth that are getting in this space or already in it. And then lastly, the betting side, yes, gaming is big on betting, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And then the media, and then just who ranks these athletes is also a critical component in the stakeholder space. I should say, Liz, give me a 10-minute and a 5-minute warning because I'm trying to flip through these slides pretty quickly. So from the eco standpoint, you can see how the teams, the individual players really flow directly to down to the streamers. And let's just talk a little bit about how you can be a player and not ever play professionally on a team. And Ninja is the best example of that. A multi-million-dollar gamer. He did play on a team, but he doesn't play on a team anymore, and he just streams. So that streaming space will also begin to develop way beyond what we think today. And then if you look at the money flow, we're going to be talking about that in depth from our expert economist. But really, this is a simplistic model of where the money is coming in and where it is flowing to. And all the sponsors that are coming into this space are very much traditional sponsors in what we would see, as well as equipment sponsors like Lenovo and different companies that are going to speak today. All right, so it's already in the billion mark. Some people question whether it's a house of cards, the ecosystem. So I don't want to paint the picture to say, hey, this structure is so secure and we're building it really rapidly. It's really important to say that there are some people in the industry that believe we're growing too rapidly, and the dollars, they're really not transparent. That's being reported by some of these agencies. So I would question all the data that you hear in the sense that it's really coming from one or two sources, and it's not as transparent as maybe some other data that's coming in from other industries and other space in the sports space. So just a word of just a little caution. So what are we looking at from the mobile perspective? All traditional sports are really pushing that mobile side. In esports, you're already mobile. But mobile is the area that's growing the most. We've got PCs, which you're sitting in a room and playing on the larger screen. But look for that mobile space. That Candy Crush game is going to elevate into that Fortnite game, to that Pokemon game, and so forth on the mobile area. I think I just saw at CES conference, they had a television that would rotate up like a kid's screen on their phone, so when they're watching TV, they can feel like they're on their screen. Holy Hannigan. Can't wait till my kid gets 15, right? And so when you look at this space, you're looking at different areas, and these areas are no different than traditional sports. You're thinking about player welfare. I've spent my career developing unions and player benefits and working conditions around athletes, and I've had many gamers call me and say, we need better working conditions, we need better benefits. So in the professional space, there's absolutely issues that need to be addressed, and wouldn't it be great if we could address them very early, not like traditional sports that went through strikes and boycotts and so forth, but somehow the human nature doesn't learn from our past all the time very quickly. Okay, so when we look at players at the pro level, most of them are becoming employees, but I will tell you in the beginning, many of them were independent contractors. And while that doesn't seem like a huge issue, when you're an employee, you can unionize, and also you get different benefits versus an independent contractor. So I think this is an area that's definitely moving in, for my opinion, a positive space of becoming more employees so they can do this at a full-time level and not a part-time level. So what are the things in the players' agreements? very traditional. They have bonuses, they have non-compete clauses, and so forth. The most interesting one that's that's been in the news is their moral clause. And if they say something against China in one incident, that athlete didn't receive their prize money and then had to arbitrate sort of back some of his right to play the game. So look at the moral clause being online and a constant streaming as a difficult area to enforce, but also an area that we're going to see a lot of news around. And what is morally correct has always been a gray area, not just for lawyers, but for sports as well. So what are we looking at? The key components in a player's contract really is the termination, who owns what. Think about it. You've got all these videos online playing this particular game. That game company can pull down those videos because you don't have the IP rights to those streaming, right? They haven't yet because they look at it as good advertisement, but I think that space will begin to change. All right, and then who owns what, right? So who owns the equipment, the trophies, the awards, the data that's collected on these athletes? So think about it. If you have data on a football player, you can know when they're not hitting as strong or when they're slowing down, even a minute section. Or a baseball player, you can see a pitcher maybe dropping a quarter of an inch when they're throwing. That data is then collected by the team, and it can be used for or against that athlete when renegotiating their contract terms. So the data collection on an e-gamer would be very specific to maybe their twitch muscles are changing or their eye to twitch reaction is changing. So the data could be great in training, but it could also be used as a negative in negotiating their contract. And who owns that data is going to play out in the next few years. So let's look quickly at the college level. I've got about 8 minutes left, I think. Scholastic esports space, you can see there's different organizations. The one organization I will highlight at the top level, at the college varsity level, is NACE. They're a division of NAIA, which is a smaller version of the NCAA. And they have smaller colleges, but right now they have 177 colleges in their esports organization. So I think NACE is really coming out where the NCAA said we're not going to embrace esports at this point. NAIA said we are, and we're going to create this separate organization called NAC. The other area that I would look at is sort of what's going to happen at the college space. We have experts in that area today, so I'm going to leave that up to them. But there are definitely different players trying to organize different leagues. And then what does it look like in the college space? Well, exactly like the pro space. They're looking at similar types of revenue, other tournaments, maybe a percentage of merchandise, which plays into that pay for play area that's happening in the NCAA and college sports today. Esports might lead the way in developing the proper structure for payment directly to the athletes and not just the colleges. So we'll see what happens with that. And then there's, here's NACE, and here's some of their figures. They came out with 177 yesterday, so sorry if that number is off today. Robert Morris was the first university to launch an esports team. I spoke to the gentleman several years ago, and they were very serious in this space, and they still remain very serious in this space, but other universities, and we're going to hear from UNC today. So there are also college degrees that are popping up specifically in esports. I teach at GW at the law school and the master's program, and we absolutely teach it in the law class, but it's not a specific class just on esports yet. And then we have, in the master's program, we have an esports class that's online. So look for colleges to really ramp up this space for a whole degree in esports as well. And then quickly, K through 12, you're looking at different organizations. I will highlight one I do know well, EGF, E-Gaming Federation, and think of them as the NCAA of esports in the high school level. So different organizations are teaming up with traditional, like the National High School Association, to figure out how to develop the growth rate in that area. And although I didn't mention it, a friend of mine has come from Tacoma Park who is developing the space at the rec level. So even if it isn't in the K through 12 schools, recreation departments are also looking at developing that space. And you can talk to Javante. He's here today on how he got that through our city council to really fund a rec esports. And I went in and spoke to the students on different professions in the esports space. So it's very exciting to see 8th graders and 7th graders all together. So these are the factors that are going to apply to all 3 levels, and I'm going to run through them because I think I have 2 minutes. So integrity, there's already an organization, ESIC, that is focused on the integrity of esports. And that looks at different areas, including cheating, which is a big issue on the online space. And then the market itself, from the gambling side and the gaming side and the loot box side, these are all terms that our experts are going to dive into deeper. But just know that, in my opinion, a lot of the traditional owners are getting into the e-gaming space, not just because it's potential growth, but you're already online, and then that means you can already gamble. So you're not making a transition from watching something, you're in it, and then you're gambling, and the loot boxes and so forth. And so people are looking into whether that gambling space for the 13 and under space and how that evolves for minors versus the pro level. So look for more organizations to really focus on gaming, gambling in this space coming up. And there'll be a legit market, an illegit market, just like there is in many areas in traditional sports. Doping is an issue within esports that we need to get our heads around. Cheating comes in all forms, which our experts can talk about, and then hacks as well. And apparently my son has indicated that hacks is very different from cheating. So we can talk about that if we had a little more time. But he did give me a whole dissertation about that to explain to you. So match fixing is also something that's happened in esports. So how the industry is going to handle security and fixing is an area of growth. And then lastly, the health issues, which is critical to me. I mean, I think about your lower back, your carpal tunnel syndrome, your eyes, and so forth. I mean, I see a lot more kids in glasses, and I'm like thinking, wow, is this have anything to do with being on the screen and how the blue light affects our retina and our growth? Remember, these kids are young and their minds are developing really faster. We're not just looking at an adult head, we're looking at the kid's head and how it's evolving while playing the games and developing the games. So we're in the infancy, we're growing, and I hope for the most part that we grow at the right pace, at the right time, and at the right level. And this is a great start to start that conversation. Thank you.
All right, that was amazing. We're gonna get set up for our next panel. If we could have the panel, and would the first panel come up and join us? It's my pleasure to introduce our first panel, which is the economics of esports. They'll provide case studies and insights into the question of what are some of the current economic impacts of esports and what are the potentials for business innovation in this space. We'll first hear some short presentations from the panel and then go to a moderated question and answer and then open it up to more public questions. So joining us on this panel, we have Joshua Hafkin, who's the owner and founder of Game Gym, which is a Bethesda, Maryland-based community site for esports. Grant Paranjape, Vice President of Esports Business for the Washington Justice, DC's own professional Overwatch team. Andrew McNeil, Director of Esports from Monumental Sports and Entertainment. Andreas Laguerra, International Trade Specialist from the Department of Commerce. And moderating this entire discussion and keeping these guys in line is Mike Hume, Editor for Launcher, which is the Washington Post section on gaming and news analysis. So thank you very much, gentlemen. And here's a clicker.
Is that gonna, how does that work with the PDF?
You gotta point at the laptop.
No? Okay.
It's just a PDF, so you may have to click it. Cool, thank you. Hey, good morning, everybody. You can go ahead and click. My name is Josh Hafkin. I'm the owner and founder of the Game Gym, which is a local business in Rockville, Maryland. And I'm going to fly through my slides because I want to get to some videos at the end. But the main thing and what I want to do behind me is not really, talk about my accomplishments, but more that esports offers opportunities that kind of didn't exist before. And I was a traditional sport athlete. I was a swimmer for pretty much 2/3 of my life. I competed in college at the Olympic trials and then got out of college, and I was confused because I was a really good swimmer and didn't really have any skills. So I, went the normal route, and I tried to get into sports marketing. I looked for ticket sales jobs at the Nationals and Wizards and different places like that, and thank God I didn't get them. Because I wouldn't be here today. And so luckily I got an opportunity at Red Peg Marketing, which is a ad agency here in Rockville, or in Alexandria, sorry. And there I really got to learn. And so we were Geico's experiential marketing agency. And so we did everything from state fairs to NASCAR events. And they kept on challenging us, where's the next big groups of people? And I was saying Comic-Cons, esports events, Geico, you already have these characters, so this is a perfect avenue for you guys, and you already invest in a lot of traditional sports. And so through Geico, through working on activations for Square Enix and Warner Brothers games, I got to go to every single gaming event across the United States and some in South America over about a 2-3 year span. And I got a very clear vision of the landscape. And so brands would come to us and they would say, how do we interact in this space? And we would dictate and kind of build programs for them. So we brought Geico, a non-endemic brand, into the esports space and brought the program from a couple $100,000 to over a $2 million program in a short span of time. And companies like Geico is a lot of what's funding the industry and the industry's growth at the moment. From there, I went to Bethesda Softworks, worked on a wildly successful game in Wolfenstein 2 and an incredibly disappointing game in Quake Champions. And so I learned a ton there. And those two experiences gave me a really clear vision of the landscape and who's doing what. And essentially, the Justice, for example, are 3 years old. They are an emerging professional esports league and team. The collegiate scene is kind of just forming. It's kind of like the WWE in the early days where there's different like fiefdoms and different things doing different things across the United States. The high school scene is barely emerging, and there's pretty much nothing and very few things at the community and local level, and especially that time when people are learning how to play games. So the reason why we've had so many issues with games, the reason why parents are pulling their hair out, is the last 20 years we've gone with no one teaching anyone how to do this appropriately. Unless you had an older brother, older sister, or parent who gamed, you were figuring this out for yourself. And some people figured it out and were okay, and some people didn't. And we don't let our kids do anything by themselves or without guidance. So it's kind of crazy that this world we've essentially abandoned. And so what I noticed is there was this huge gap in the space. And so I went ahead and created the Game Gym. Nice, thank you. And so this was actually really cool. This is when the Justice came to visit the game gym. So we've got this really great interaction between pro scene and community. But we are an esports training center in Rockville, Maryland, but I like to call us an innovation center because we do way more than just train. We have summer camps, we do private lessons, we do daily classes. We have a coach certification program. There's really no certification for coaches. And also the idea of an esports coach, I think we kind of invented. There are Overwatch coaches, there are Smash coaches, there are League of Legends coaches. But what we are is we're the middle school gym teachers of esports. And our job is to teach kids leadership skills, communication skills, how to be a good winner, how to be a good loser, while we're also teaching them how to play these games. So we also host the Flex Tournament Series, which is a Smash Brothers competition that we average about 50 to 100 people every 2 weeks. And it's a really wonderful thing that we've been able to build, and you'll see a little video at the end. So the reason why this all happened is that esports has an accessibility problem. There is a huge disconnect between the parent in the community who's just going about their life, whose kid likes games, and what is happening at the pro scene or the ninjas of the world. There are very few places or almost no places where kids can learn games and also healthy gaming habits. One of the reasons why I started the game gym is I wanted to get better at Street Fighter. And I was looking around and I was like, why is there no, like, if you want to learn how to play basketball, there's a basketball, camps and things like that. There's pools if you want to learn how to swim. Like, why is there no place I can go to learn how to play esports? And so I figured out, and that I blew my mind that it didn't exist. There was actually a dude's basement in DC that you could go, but that was like a little sketch. And you definitely wouldn't drop your kids off there. And so the next part is that the parents are digital immigrants. A lot of these people don't really know the games, and their kids are digital natives. So you have digital immigrants trying to corral and educate digital natives, and that's backwards. So there's a huge disconnect between parents and kids. Kids can't articulate things to the parents. Parents can't articulate things to the kids. So what we do is we sit in between and help a little bit of that conversation. The last is that there are very few bottom rungs to the ladder. How do you, if you want to be a professional basketball coach, well, you coach rec, you coach high school, you coach, a bad college team, you coach a better college team, and then you work your way up. Those steps right now really don't exist in the local communities, or they exist in some communities like in LA, San Fran, and New York. But, random, cities around America, it really doesn't exist. So what we did is we created the game gym, and what we are is we are the esports conduit to the community. So like I said, we teach kids, but we also stress balance. We stress health, we stress nutrition, we stress that you have to learn what you do when you put the game down. So I really promote kids to learn music. The other one is cooking, because kids are always, gamer kids always have, supposedly bad eating habits. However, a lot of our people are vegans, and there's a lot of different misconceptions about games. So, we really stress balance while we encourage kids to be themselves. We offer support and resources to parents. We offer parent education courses. We do parent and kid classes and private lessons. And also, they just don't have a resource that they feel like they can rely on. So we're able to provide that resource for them. And lastly, we're providing opportunities for creatives, for tournament organizers, for coaches, and other people to cut their teeth in this industry and come out, essentially working at a startup like the Game Gym with a ton of different experiences that they can take on to their careers. So how do we differ from kind of what's out there right now? Right now, what I see in this industry, especially in the youth and kind of, I would say middle school scene or high school scene, is what I'm calling cast the net esports. And that's people in LA, New York, San Fran, and they design a program and then just throw it across the United States and just try to pull in as many people as possible. And there's very little investment in the community. They'll rent out a movie theater or something like that. There might be a different movie theater next time. You might not have the same coaches each time, things like that. There's a lot of kind of inconsistency. and not really investing in the community. So, thank you. So why that misses? So esports communities are all different. Here in DC, we've got an incredible Super Smash Brothers scene. And you can't just come in and have an esports event because it's an esports event and expect people to come. You have to know your community. We actually did this maybe about a year ago. We held a Street Fighter event here that was I would assume everybody agrees that it was kind of a failure. And the issue is that we don't have a Street Fighter scene in DC. But if you talk to us and you talk to the community, we could tell you we have an incredible Super Smash Brothers scene that is willing to come, and if you back us, we're willing to back you. The other thing is that with inconsistency, parents are not going to buy in. You need to see the logo and name a couple times before you actually invest in it. And so as different programs kind of come and go, parents are going to not really, they have so much going on in their lives that they need to see a logo a couple times or a name or hear it a couple times for it to really sink in and for them to trust it. Second to last, if you invest in the community will invest in you. And it's something that I've really preached. If you are a new organization, don't try to start your own Smash Brothers competition. Give money to the people who are doing great Smash competitions. Go to them, learn, be a part of the community. And then when you do your thing, the community will be ready to invest in you. And then lastly, when you come and go, your staff are not people who, they're essentially brand ambassadors. They're not staff. And there's a big difference between a brand ambassador and a coach. A brand ambassador can wear many hats, and essentially they'll shill whatever they're shilling that day. What we're trying to do is kind of invest in people so that they'll invest in us. So why I think that that's super important. So what I did is I looked at traditional sports. Can you hit that next one? Thank you. So this is the youth sports industry in America alone is a $15 billion industry. So we're all sitting up here being like, esports globally is a $1 billion industry, and we're like, woo, that's exciting. But like, this is where the real money is. And so this is actually the youth sports economy, which includes everything from travel to private coaching to apps that organize leagues and live stream games, is now a $15.3 billion market, according to Wintergreen Research, a private firm that tracks the industry. This is from Time. There's also a couple other articles on that. But that's kind of what I looked at. So clubs and local teams hold incredible power. When I was looking at colleges, I chose UNC because it's the best. But my coach was really, had a lot of influence on how where I went with my future. If there's a tournament series, a league, your local coaches will have a lot of influence over whether you participate in this or participate in that. You play for your high school, but you train with your club team. This is soccer, this is basketball, this is swimming, unless you go to like a Montrose Christian or one of those specialty schools. That's generally the case. And then the other two things are consistency is key. Like I said, places who invest in the community will invest in you. And then lastly, parents. Parents are huge. And in the gaming world, there's parents shouldn't be involved. But no, we want parents involved. If parents buy in, they become essentially your most valuable allies. And I think that that's something that, parents are not a necessary evil. They are a powerful ally. And I think that the more that we can get people to come and be a part of our community, see that it's a good, positive community, the more they're willing to support their kid, to bring orange slices and do the same things you do for traditional sports. So the main thing is that in the youth scene, it's underserved, and there's three major underserved communities. You have parents, you have kids, and you have coaches or future esports employees. And so what I see us doing is providing opportunities for those and filling a gap. So anybody who's looking to get into esports and those kinds of things, take a look at this scene and you'll be able to see that there's a number of different opportunities. So I have a couple videos that kind of highlight what we do and show a little bit of the difference that I think we make. So First, we're going to show a little summer camp promo, and the goal of this is to show that what we do is, about 50% gaming and 50% other things. We have different people come in and talk to our kids about health, nutrition, all these different things, and then we also game. So what we're doing is we're teaching games as just another part of life. All right, so that was our summer camp promo from last year. We actually didn't make a video for this past summer, but that was at our old location, and we had people who worked on public speaking, we had trainers, we had all these different people who came in. So the next video is, a lot of these kids are kind of unreachable. And so here's an avenue that brands can use to reach kids and demographics that are tough to reach. Elgato helps with streaming software, and they sent us a bunch of gear. So that's another avenue. Brands can come, and we essentially are the first touch point for a lot of these kids. So, whether it's Logitech, Lenovo, Elgato, we have the avenue and we have the ability to reach kids that generally are not consuming traditional media and are generally not consuming, things through normal avenues. All right, so the last video is a little Flex promo video. Flex is our Smash tournament. And what it does is it shows you a little bit of the community. These kids were not doing anything on Friday evenings, and now they're coming here to Flex. So it's a great way to create bonds in the community. And also, like, we have people who are running the tournament. We have people who are casting. We have people who are playing. So you're not just there. The esports ecosystem is much larger than just people playing the game. There's all kinds of opportunities for people to learn. And the last thing that we do is I think that we create new futures for people by giving coaches and kids this avenue. What we've seen is people come into the game gym, and a lot of times it's eyes down, kind of a little bit of ambivalence, and then after a couple weeks, they're awake and they're alive and they're engaging with you in a whole new way. And I truly believe that the power of telling something, for the first time in their lives, these kids are hearing that what they do and what they love is important and that we're going to support it. And that's incredibly empowering. The reason why I feel like I'm confident is my success in traditional sports. And so I feel like, if we could provide that for these kids, they can have a new future. But, don't take my word for it. We have an audio clip. I had the pleasure of being on the Kojo Namdi show, and one of our game gym moms called in. So we're going to play that audio clip from her right now.
Yes, I agree.
I want to move on to someone who is a member of the gym to talk about the effect it has on her family. Hi, Katie. Katie in Potomac, Maryland. You're on the air.
Hi, Kojo. Thanks for taking my call. Hi, Josh. How are you doing?
Hey, thank you so much for calling in.
He's doing better now that you've called. Yes.
Yeah. Kojo, my son, Connor, is a member at the game gym. He's about to turn 14. And I have to say the change in him in the last year after joining the game gym has been huge for us. My husband and I were both college athletes. We wanted traditional sports for our children. Our kids have had either a ball or a bat in their hands since they could walk. And Connor went that path too, but there was no passion in him for that. We saw there was a struggle to get him to games. There was a struggle for him to be happy about his performance. But the thing that he was always passionate about was gaming. And that's when we saw him really kind of take off. He came to us with this flyer for the game gym. I thought it was a joke. As a parent, it didn't make any sense to me. I'm like, why would I allow my kid to play more video games? It seemed to be always something that we were trying to limit with him. But as I got to talk to Josh, and he has lots of great programs on educating parents about esports, I realized that it's very similar to regular traditional sports in terms of participation in sportsmanship and in really more in that passion. And Connor goes to the game gym 2 days a week, occasionally on Fridays for tournaments. We have taken him to tournaments in Virginia, and that's where I've seen him really flourish. And I always said to him, like, this comes so easily to you, Connor. And he goes, no, Mom, I work really hard at this. Like, this is something that he works really hard at, and this is something that he excels in. And it's been a wonder to watch him sort of flourish in this last year because of it.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, and thank you very much for your call.
So just to close, what we're doing is, I don't think there's anything like us in the United States. The youth scene is barely emerging. There are very few people who are helping kids and parents navigate this space. So I see it as a huge opportunity. Like I said, youth esports. You got esports, $1 billion industry, youth sports, a $15 billion industry. So you put those two things together and you can create a lot of growth as well as help a lot of people. So thank you guys so much, and I appreciate your time.
Not really sure how I follow that up. That was a pretty awesome presentation, Josh. Hey everyone, so my name's Grant Pranjape. I'm clearly the least prepared up here on this panel with nothing in front of me, so we'll try to have some fun with this. Just wait 1 second. Thanks. Yeah, I gotta tease this out a little bit so that you want to watch the video. So I'm the vice president of the Washington Justice, as Mike mentioned. We're the Overwatch League team here for the DC region. I think just a quick background on myself. So I'm born and raised in Michigan. I'd like to think I'm one of the people who made it, as Josh was talking about. My parents forced me into every traditional sports summer camp you can think of. I was, a high school swimmer, but I loved playing video games. And I played a game called World of Warcraft professionally throughout my high school years. Back then, playing professionally looked a lot different than it does now. It was making $500 a month, and you were killing it, right? And it was a pretty good time. I have two very traditional parents. They're both PhD economists, and so I was given 3 career paths in life, and it was law, finance, or medicine. I chose medicine. So I went down to New Orleans. I was a neuroscience major at Tulane, finished in 3 years and got my MBA straight after. And I was fortunate enough to have 6 months before I had to decide on going to med school or not. And I said, you know what? I've been interested in esports my whole life, been playing video games my whole life. I'm going to try to get a job. And for those 6 months, I got a ton of no's. Turns out being an MBA with no experience isn't a great look. Pro tip for everyone out there. And so I ended up answering a Twitter ad. Yes, I'm proud to say I've gotten all my jobs off of Twitter. Take that, parents. And it was for a community manager role at an endemic team called Splice. So an endemic esports org being one that participates in traditional esports titles like League of Legends, Halo, Counter-Strike, Call of Duty. And I was fortunate enough to have an interview with the founder, and he asked me very, very candidly, do you really want to do community management? And I said, no. I'm a very honest guy. I said, I want a job in esports. He said, perfect, you're hired. And I started 2 weeks later. I worked there for about a year and a half, and kind of my claim to fame was leading our round of investment with the Boston Bruins. So that was my introduction to the sports world. I think funny story is I like to think I'm every sports owner's worst nightmare. I have never owned a cable package. I had been to 5 NBA games. I had been to no NHL games, and here I was taking a round of fundraising from the Boston Bruins. I went to a few hockey games after that. A little bit after that time, I was actually approached by an executive recruitment firm, Prodigy Sports. They were doing a round of hiring for the director of esports role at Monumental, just down the road, and asked if I'd be interested in moving to DC. And sure enough, I said yes. So over at Monumental, I had the pleasure of launching our NBA 2K League franchise, Wizards District Gaming, as well as their CAPS esports program. I spent almost 2 years there working with those fine folks. And then sure enough, DC got an Overwatch League team, and Overwatch for me was a game that I was always really passionate about. I was a top 500 player when the game came out, and sure enough, they were looking for someone to run the franchise. And so I moved over there almost a year ago now, and it's been a pretty wild ride. So I have some slides mostly talking about how esports has shifted to being a little bit more geographically focused, and also what we're doing specifically at the Justice. I'm also a firm believer in I don't like listening to myself talk. So if you have questions, please interrupt me and we'll go from there. But without further ado. Hopefully that wasn't too graphic for anyone. Overwatch is rated T for teen. So we are one of the 20 Overwatch League teams. We are coming home for the 2020 season. This is probably the most the biggest shift that esports has seen in a while. If you think about traditional esports franchises like Team Liquid, Counter Logic Gaming, TSM, they're primarily based in Los Angeles, California area. And they play out of a studio, right? Once a week, you would take your team to the Riot Studios. If you're a 2K League team, you'd go to the NBA 2K League Studios in New York, and you play in a studio that seats maybe 100 to 200 people, and your matches are broadcast on Twitch, YouTube, wherever the media rights lie, that is how you as a team operate for seasons. And for the Overwatch League, We're very fortunate. Sorry, we can actually flip. We're very fortunate that Activision Blizzard has opted to move into more of a traditional sports model. So if you think about where the Wizards play, the Wizards are technically based here in DC, but they play home matches here and then away matches and for NBA teams all across the U.S. And so for the 2020 season, Overwatch League teams will be doing that exact thing. So we are hosting what are known as home stands. Here in DC, we have 5 of them. And essentially, it's a 2-day festival-style experience at venues that seat anywhere from 2,000 to 3,500 people. And just like a traditional sports team, we're selling tickets against it. We're putting on fan experiences. And really what that kind of unlocks is, we can actually flip. What this kind of really unlocks is a whole new element outside of just where esports is succeeding in terms of driving viewership in the 18 to 34-year-old demo, right? So if you look at kind of where traditional sports are failing, it's really capturing what I like to say are millions of me's, right? I don't love traditional sports. I love esports, right? And if you as a sponsor want to work with a team that reaches that audience, primarily you've been choosing the best team that year, right? So if you're a sponsor, you would go and look at the Overwatch League rankings. You could see that San Francisco Shock won the grand finals last year, and you're like, okay, that's a pretty smart bet for my money. But if you're a brand like Geico or Leidos and you're based here in DC, you're like, well, I don't really want to sponsor the San Francisco team. I want to sponsor the local team, right? And first to admit, the Justice didn't have the best season last year before I joined. It's the reasoning for why you would sponsor the local team becomes a little challenging, right? They're based in LA, they're not here, the players aren't based here. And so if you move the team home and move to a true home and away format, you unlock all of those local sponsor dollars, in addition to really being able to partner with local operators in a meaningful way. So I'm really happy to say, Josh is actually, and the Game Gym are actually the official practice area for all of the visiting teams for the 2020 season. So all the teams who come in and play out of our arenas in DC will actually practice at the Game Gym for the weeks that they're here. So we can go. Just at a high level, I think people often say why, my parents included. They still don't believe I have a job a lot of the time. And then you look at the list of owners that we have just in Overwatch League alone, and this list is mirrored well in LCS. And I'd like to think all these people wouldn't make a bad decision. And ultimately, that's a lot of the guiding philosophy. But really, it is a truly impressive group of owners who bring a lot to the table, right? I think they have done a good job, and Blizzard in particular has done a good job in placing people with endemic esports experience at the helm of a lot of these franchises, supported by owners who have success in scaling businesses, in scaling, billion-dollar, industries and whatnot, and it's created a really powerful league, right? And so in particular, we like to say Overwatch League has the healthiest growth in esports, right? And I'm just going to read a little bit off the slide in that we were the only professional sports league that saw an increase in the 18 to 34-year-old demo last year, which is again a really meaningful stat when you look at where brands want to reach audiences, right? If you're Geico or Leidos, you're really interested in particular of that demographic, and for good reason. So just looking at the schedule for the league a little bit, I know it's a little small, but we here in DC really believe in the homestand model. So teams were basically required to host at least 2 homestands, and then there was kind of an option to take on more. And here at a high level, our ownership is Mark Ein, so he also owns the City Open, the Washington Castles, has a lot of experience in the live event space, and as a result of that, we actually took on some additional homestands, and we'll be hosting 3 of them at the Anthem, which is obviously a pretty premier venue down at the Wharf, and then 2 of them at Events DC's brand new arena, the Entertainment Sports Arena, and it's pretty cool. We actually have the 2 newest venues in the entire Overwatch League, so we're excited about that little tidbit. So again, just kind of going back to the why. So here in the DMV, we have a pretty high concentration of not only people, but also Overwatch players in particular, and then you kind of expand the bubbles outward. So from like a marketing standpoint, the lowest hanging fruit is obviously anyone who plays the game Overwatch, right? It's really simple to target those folks and convert them into buying tickets and being fans of kind of their local team. I never really understood the fandom until we hosted our inaugural watch party, and it was before I actually joined the team, and it was at Penn Social, local bar downtown, very kind of game esportsy themed. And so a watch party, right, meant that you and 400 of your closest friends paid $10 a ticket to sit in a room together and just watch your team play the same, stream that you could watch by yourself at home. And for me, that was a really powerful moment, seeing folks come together and ultimately, want to be a part of just watching with their friends, even though there wasn't a ton of value add there. And so for us, obviously hosting these live events, we think we can kind of knock that out of the park a little bit. Unfortunately, Josh took all my time, so we're going to fly through some of these. We're bringing an audience home together. I think it's really unique that you get to see some of the best teams across the league here. So it's not just the Justice playing one team. It's the Justice playing one team plus London playing Paris, Seoul playing Guangzhou. It really does kind of attract more than just hardcore DC esports fans. We talked a little bit about the Anthem. It's a great venue. Come down to the Wharf. ESA is awesome too. And then blue chip brands are ultimately involved too, which is kind of commercially one of the best reasons and most excited reasons to be in Overwatch League. Come watch a match. Sorry, that's actually all I had, but thank you.
Hi, I'm Andrew McNeil. I am the Director of Esports at Monumental Sports and Entertainment. So for those not familiar, Monumental Sports and Entertainment, organization here in DC, primarily known for our sports properties, namely the Washington Capitals NHL team, the Washington Wizards NBA team, the 2019 WNBA champion Washington Mystics, Capital City Go-Go, our NBA G League team, and Wizards District Gaming, which is our NBA 2K League team. So primarily my role, I oversee Wizards District Gaming, which is our esports team that competes in the NBA 2K League, which is a esports league that's a joint partnership between the NBA and Take-Two Interactive, which is the developer of the NBA 2K video game. And it's similar to the NBA in that it's 5-on-5 basketball. You have 5 human players controlling 5 players on the court on each side. And we play a sort of 6-month-long season running March to August. I also oversee Caps Gaming, which is a new sub-brand that we've created this year, building upon Grant's work previously, that is sort of dedicated to fostering the esports community in the NHL under the sort of Washington Capitals umbrella. I joined MSC about 6 months ago. Previously, I was the head of gaming at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. And then before that, I had launched the sports track at South by Southwest, which sort of focused on the intersection of sports and technology. And for me, that was kind of my entry point into esports. I think, like these guys, I played traditional sports my whole life. I don't know if you saw me walk up. I'm 6'7". I played basketball all my life. I played some college basketball. But you can only practice basketball for so many hours a day before you get tired. And so I played video games the rest of that time. So, this merging of these worlds, these traditional sports worlds and esports and competitive gaming really kind of spoke to me. And when I was at South by Southwest working on this sports track, this became a theme that was coming up, and it was something that I was really interested in. And so when I moved over to take over South by Southwest Gaming, I basically went all in on esports because it was fascinating to me, and I thought something that could really succeed for that conference. So something I was really interested in and was happy to kind of pursue further. And so when the opportunity to join MSC came up, I jumped at it. And so, in addition to kind of running those two parts of our esports program, I work pretty closely with our partnerships department at MSC to help them bring in sponsors to align with our esports properties because, while there are merchandise opportunities and there are sort of ticketing opportunities for us, nearly 100% of our revenue is sponsorship revenue right now. So that's, it's kind of the lifeblood of what we're doing at a team level. So I work really closely with our sponsorship department to kind of help them sell our esports programs to their clients. And then I work really closely with my boss, Zach Leonsis, who to pursue and sort of vet new initiatives and opportunities in esports and how we can sort of bring those into what we do at MSC on the esports side. If you want to go to the next slide. Oh, hey, all right. There we go. So a little bit about Wizards District Gaming. It is one of the inaugural members of the NBA 2K League. I believe there's 17 franchises 17 NBA franchises that joined the 2K League that first year, Wizards District Gaming being one of them. Number 2 in the league in social followers. I think social content and video content is a big part of what we do beyond sort of just the gameplay. We qualified for the playoffs in our first season. Thank you, Grant. We didn't this past season, but it worked out well. For those familiar with the NBA and how that goes, you don't make the playoffs, you enter the draft lottery, and then ping pong balls go certain ways, and you get sort of draft order. The NBA 2K League works the same way, and the gods are smiling upon us, and the ping pong balls fell our way. We have the number 1 pick in the February's 2K League draft, which we're very excited about. If you want to go to the video, I will show you a little bit about Wizards District Gaming and what it looks like.
And here's the tip. Reese is playing out of his mind. Well, he still had Gilly open, but Dave Fry will make the 3. This is what I do!
Friend was skating outside. I asked him if he had an extra skateboard so I can try it.
Times Dave Fry. This league needs rivalries.
Coming out of the 6-man, it takes hard work to prove why you should be started.
At the buzzer, user pick has won the ball game.
Yep, 2016, bro. Boy, clean,
bro.
I'm with this too.
Come on, you have to at least touch it.
So one of the things, we do a lot of content outside of the actual games. Monumental has a really robust production department, so video content is a big part of what we do. And we're fortunate that players in the NBA 2K League, and especially kind of our players, have really good personalities that we're able to capture. Dave Fry was named the league's best trash talker this past season, and we're very proud of him. So you can kind of get a glimpse of that in some of those clips. So in addition to Wizards District Gaming, which is kind of the majority of what we do in esports at MSC, this year we launched Caps Gaming, which mentioned kind of built off of what Grant had previously done on the Capital side in esports. And what Caps Gaming really is it's a sub-brand that we launched that lives under the Washington Capitals umbrella. The NHL doesn't have a formal esports league structure like the NBA does. They've left it up to the individual teams to kind of pursue their own local activations in esports. And we are fortunate that we have, the NBA, we have an NBA 2K League team. We have a dedicated esports department because of that, whereas most NHL teams do not. I think Toronto might be the only one that does. And so, we have myself, we have Patrick Crossan, who's our head coach for our Wizards District Gaming team. And then we have another, Jordan Zelnicker, who's our esports business manager, who kind of helps me with working with our partnerships team and oversees our marketing initiatives and social media initiatives. And then we actually just recently hired a person for our production team who's dedicated full-time solely to esports in our productions there. So we have a really large staff, and so we feel not only the freedom, but also the kind of the obligation to push the envelope on what we can do on the NHL side with esports. And so we launched this dedicated sub-brand, and as a part of that, we created a 6-on-6 NHL league this season, just an online league that will eventually do an in-person semifinals and finals here in DC. But primarily most of the competitions that NHL teams have hosted from esports are either one-on-one, where it's one person controlling one NHL team, another person controlling the other team, or 3v3. We went 6v6, where it's kind of similar to the NBA 2K League, where every player on the ice is controlled by a human. And we launched this hoping that we could get 32 teams to sign up. We ended up having 80. So we're really excited with that. And then second thing that we really did this year was that we were one of the first NHL teams to quote unquote sign a pro. There's a fellow by the name of John, who goes by the gamer tag of John Wayne, who's one of the top NHL pros out there. He finished third in the NHL Gaming World Championships in 2018 and second this past year. So we're hoping 2020 he'll finish first, and it'll be great for all of us. But he's essentially our ambassador and our representative of Caps Gaming to the NHL community. So he goes to other events, even those put on by other NHL teams will represent Caps Gaming at those tournaments. And he streams from the Washington Capitals Twitch channel for 10, 15, 20 hours a week. And is really just sort of a good ambassador and representative of what we do in the community, in hopes that we can really kind of further, push along the NHL esports scene, in hopes that eventually there will be an NHL league that we will sort of jump in with both feet. And then lastly, on the esports front that we do at MSC, we have our leadership has an investment stake in a holding company called Axiomatic, which has controlling interest in Team Liquid, which you've heard mentioned before. They're really one of the top esports organizations in the world. They own and operate teams in 13 different esports. They're one of the franchise slots in the North American League Championship Series and League of Legends, and are one of the most successful teams in that organization. They've won 4 straight NALCS titles, which we're really excited about. And so they're really a part of the Monumental family here too. And so it's nice to have that endemic world represented at MSC as well.
All right, so good morning, everyone. And before I begin, I just want to say thank you for everyone that came in today and braved that cold weather out there. And also a special thank you for all the streamers out there who are tuning into us rather than Nintendo's Pokemon Direct that's also being simultaneously live streamed right now. So you have good taste when it comes to your viewage. But you can watch that later. It'll be archived on YouTube, I believe. So my name is Andres Laguerra. I work as an international trade specialist. And I'm also the Deputy of Video Games for the Global Media and Entertainment Team within the International Trade Administration under the U.S. Department of Commerce. So I'm here today to talk about this very exciting topic of esports and kind of give you a general bird's eye view of what's happening within the esports industry and economy, because it's pretty exciting. I think, as Liz alluded to when she introduced us all, esports is very much sort of like a wild west industry right now. And it's actually not the first time that we've actually jumped into esports. There was an attempt at this back in 2007 or so. But of course, the economic crisis hit, the Great Recession, and a lot of investment dried up. So it's exciting to see the industry taking a second shot at this. And it's exciting to see how it's evolved and changed over time. So one of the big things that we saw, that we see now that's a little different is, one, we have the introduction of franchises, which didn't exist in the past. So esports is learning a lot from other types of traditional sports like the NFL and the NBA. And another big thing that we didn't have in the past is the technology of live streaming. I mean, back when we first attempted esports, iPhones were just being introduced, and now we have just an explosion of media and the ability to just take in information right now in the moment. So why is there an interest in esports right now? And there's a lot of interest from a lot of different angles. For the gamers out there, they love it when they see someone who's 16 years old, just like them, and they win a big tournament at Fortnite, and they earn that $3 million prize pool. It's amazing for them. They connect with that, and they want to learn and see how they can do better. They want to be part of that scene. For the game developers and publishers, it's great marketing. It's great publicity. It's a way for communities to build around their games. It's a way for them to extend the longevity of their games, and have just that big marketing push. For people that create esports teams, for the angel investors, for the venture capitalists, this is a brand new market, and they want to come in early, and they're willing to invest now and hope maybe 5, 7, 10 years down the road, they'll get a return on that investment. But they want to corner that market as soon as possible. And for advertisers and sponsors, as was alluded to earlier, esports is is something that's grown for the younger generations. So you have millennials and Generation Z who they're not watching as much television as their parents, and they are potentially not as watching as much sports. So these advertisers are looking to see where they can find these demographics. And you have these young adults and young teenagers who are playing these video games, and they're looking into esports, they're looking at live streams of games. And it seems like a great potential. So they're investing right now and seeing if they can attract those eyeballs for their products. So esports revenue sources. As I just mentioned, advertising and sponsorships, I think that's the biggest one, which covers about 90% of the total amount of revenue that comes into esports. The next big thing, and I think it's growing and developing, are media licensing rights. So you have online companies like Twitch and YouTube and Facebook. They are hashing out deals with esports leagues to exclusively air tournaments on their websites. But it's not just them as well. It's also traditional media outlets. So I believe like Disney, they hashed out a deal with the Overwatch League as well to air games on Disney XD and ABC and ESPN. So it's great. It's a great chance for these traditional outlets to jump on the next potential big thing, and it's great exposure for game developers to get their games out on traditional media as well. You have the prize pools from championships, and that esports teams can take home. I think that one of the biggest ones now is the international from Dota 2. I think their prize pool for 2019 was $34 million, which is huge. And then you have sort of the more traditional like ticket sales, merchandise, and content creation. Which content creation is also good for esports teams to kind of build their brand and sell themselves as people tune in, and learn about the personalities behind those teams. So I think one of the things that was brought up are esports stadiums. They're popping up. One of the big questions is, do we want, because of the franchising sort of take on esports, the aspect of having stadiums is to have localized esports teams throughout the U.S. and to have other teams travel, so you build up those local fan bases. So I think there is some discussion of, do we want sort of that traditional sort of sports, like traditional sports take on esports, or if you want to say have all teams gathered in one arena and play, because it is a digital format and you can play online. One other thing I'll sort of mention is sort of the how esports compares to, say, traditional sports or competition with streamers. So with traditional sports, these are games like football, baseball, basketball that people have grown up with for decades or even longer. People know the rules, and it's very easy to, generally speaking, to follow what's happening in a traditional sports game. And you have basically like a ball that you're tracking from one end to the field or court. With esports, it's a little trickier. A lot of games they're brand new, and they often transition as new tastes evolve. And a lot of games, some esports are fairly easy to follow, but others have a lot of complexity and a lot of depth, and a lot of colors, and especially with sort of more things like Overwatch, you have a lot of explosions and lightning, and from Winston's Tesla coil. And
everyone here knew exactly what was happening during my video. I have no idea what you're talking about.
And there's a lot of strategy, and it's even for like a player of a game, it can be complex for someone to watch someone at the pro level play that game. So I think that's something that esports teams and leagues are working on, and to make it visually more accessible, and also emulating like traditional sports in terms of commentators, so people, even if they're new, can follow along with what's going on screen. And then finally, like esports coexist with streamers. So for those that don't know, like streaming is something of a modern phenomenon where I think Twitch TV is a big thing. It's a website where like a gamer can go online, have a camera on himself, and then have a camera of what he's playing, and then a chat window. And people tune in and watch that gamer play his game. And and there's a chat window, and they can interact and talk with him and subscribe to his channel and even submit donations. And you have some streamers who have very large fan bases, and they can be very influential too. So you have advertisers who, they're deciding, do I want to invest in this esports team, and do I want, them to have my logo, or that streamer playing that game, maybe I could ask him to, drink my tasty beverage while he's playing his stream, and that might attract a lot of viewers as well. So. That's sort of a general take. I think esports is a very exciting industry. There's a lot happening, and we're taking a lot from more traditional sports, but we're also evolving and growing. And I hope it does well, because I think the tech sector as a whole would rise up with as esports develops. So, thank you.
All right, now for the fun part. Before we get started with my questions, I just wanted to see a general show of hands. If you think you're going to have a question to ask, can you just raise your hand so I can get a sense of how much time to leave? All right, sounds good. A lot of questions, great. All right, well, me first. So I'm Mike Hume. I'm the editor of Launcher, the Washington Post new gaming and esports vertical. We launched in October. I hope you all go check us out. You can find us on the Post's website or just by going to launcher.gg. I just wanted to start with Andres. As a general interest question, was there one inciting moment or a particular time when the federal government and the Department of Commerce said, hey, this esports thing, we got to check this out. We got to get into this. What is it? What's going on?
That's a good question. I can't identify like one particular specific situation, but it's like certainly the tech sector has grown significantly over time, and just the rise of gaming within the sort of the general public consciousness has grown as well. The average gamer is in his 30s now, and so it's very much a medium that the general public has an interest in, and it's very much a medium in which communities grow and develop, and we want to ensure for a lot of reasons that we have an understanding of what's happening in the video game industry. We want to make sure it's healthy. We want to make sure that American companies are internationally competitive and are able to export their games and be successful. So we have an interest in learning about the industry as a whole, and we have an interest in seeing it succeed, in terms of just soft culture promotion as well as just general business promotion.
Professor Xavier alluded to this earlier, that there are a ton of numbers out there right now. A lot of them are staggering, in fact, in terms of franchise valuations, audience size, viewership size. There's a lot of people that are out there that are skeptical of those numbers, and they do think this is a bit of a bubble. How do you each respond to that? So you can start with Josh.
I've been a little bit outside of it since I kind of left the Bethesda and the Geico world. I definitely, when I was working with Geico, one of the big things that they were struggling with was comparing the numbers that they normally receive. We did a sponsorship with TSM. We produced like 4 billion impressions in a year, and that was 10 or 20x over what they were normally, and they just didn't know how to deal with it. I think now people are getting a little smarter, but I think these guys can give a little bit better insight.
Yeah, I mean, I think franchise value is always like a tricky number to put, to figure out exactly right. You look at like what an NBA franchise is valued at. You look at what NFL franchise is valued at, and you're like, really, like $1 billion? Oh, okay, someone much smarter than me hopefully came to that valuation. I think some numbers and some publishers in particular have done a lot of work to get the industry to a better place, right? Like so Riot and Overwatch League, for example, have worked with Nielsen to standardize viewership metric reporting through the metric of AMA, average minute audience. And so, when you have publishers who are supporting these leagues and are taking the problem of, kind of crazy valuations very seriously, you end up in a much better spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a viewership perspective, I think, the NBA 2K League is probably top 20 in terms of viewership of sort of the esports, but nowhere near like the top of the top. Since I think one of the things that we have to be cognizant of is not using those numbers to pitch our clients because we don't want to set unrealistic expectations. I think one of my biggest pet peeves is when they show esports as a whole, and it's the viewership is this, and they compare it to the NFL and the NBA. Well, it's like, well, that's not apples to apples. Like, if you're going to do that, you need to compare esports as a whole to traditional sports as a whole, because there's just so many different leagues. And so I think that's one of the things that bothers me. And I think it's kind of up to sort of us on the team side and on the league side to be honest about what those numbers are.
Andres?
So I think esports is certainly in very early days right now, and there's still a lot to figure out, and there is a lot of investment pouring into it. It's a very tricky question to answer, especially since a lot of companies that are in a sort of a startup phase, they are looking at the profits coming in over the long term rather than over the short term. So it's hard to speculate at this point in time, I think.
Got it. All right, so this is a little bit of a lightning round gut check question, sort of following up on that. The Pro League for League of Legends announced after its recent World Championships that it is now the third most popular major pro sports league among 18 to 34-year-olds in the U.S. Buy or sell?
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
The U.S. government is not interested.
So close. All right, so obviously that includes leagues like the NFL, NBA. Like, I'm sure I'm not the only one that's surprised when you hear that. Why do three of you buy it, and why do you punt?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to, like, what is the average, like, monthly number for how many people play League of Legends, right? Wasn't it like 10 million just a few months ago, right? And then you have Worlds and it gets more popular, right? I think like Riot has done a remarkable job keeping League of Legends, which is a 10-year-old title, fresh. I mean, they patch it every 2 weeks. There's a major balance patch every 4 weeks. And then you have like kind of a mid-season where they go completely crazy and break the game every 6 months, right? Like Riot has done a remarkable job in keeping the game fresh. And I mean, it doesn't surprise me when you kind of look at the fandom for League of Legends that it would top some of the traditional sports.
Yeah, and I think if you just look at the average age of the fan for some of those traditional sports leagues, baseball, football, like those are all trending upwards very quickly, whereas League of Legends and other esports are down.
Very good. Ellen mentioned earlier about the collegiate scene, and discussed briefly that the NCAA has not embraced esports at all. Why is that, and do you think that they're missing out on a huge opportunity here?
I think that a lot of it is just they aren't sure what to do yet, and if they're not sure what to do, they're not going to make a move or how to organize it. As a former NCAA athlete, I definitely think that what we will need is that merging of esports people and traditional sports people. If it's just the NCAA telling esports people what to do, that's going to be a bad idea. So hopefully they bring some esports people to the table and can help them figure that out.
Yeah, I think, the day that was announced, I'm pretty sure the esports industry all collectively popped a bottle of champagne on Twitter. The NCAA inherently, their model, I think, goes against what, endemic esports and has kind of grown up to be. We empower any individual content creator to make revenue, especially if you're, a young kid in college. We want you streaming yourself on Twitch while you're perfecting League of Legends, Overwatch, whatever your game of choice may be. I think obviously things are changing with the passing of the bill in California and whatnot, but inherently, I think the NCAA struggled with the idea of this industry breaks our model, and then the easy solution is just kind of stay out.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of talked about it before we came up here, but I think the cat's out of the bag with collegiate esports in some ways, where people are already streaming on Twitch and making revenue that way, getting prize money from tournaments. I think if the NCAA came in and tried to take that away to make it match some of the other traditional sports, I think you would find those collegiate esports athletes finding other avenues. And I think too, the other thing is that the NCAA likes control. And when you have to work with the publishers of these games for those esports, they lose a lot of control there. And that's probably something they have no interest in.
Andres, anything to add?
I don't have much more to add. I think perhaps the next panel that focuses on the education side of esports, they might have more information on that. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting for me to see how this will develop over the next couple of years.
All right. Well, I got 2 more questions for you, and then we'll turn it over to the firing squad that is the audience. What is, in your opinion, and we can go in reverse order here, starting with Andres, what is the biggest potential pitfall for the esports industry as it continues its growth?
It's a very good question. So potential pitfalls, I think certainly, I think we saw it in the keynote. We want to ensure that elements of cheating or hacking are at a minimum when games are promoted live. We want to ensure sort of the honesty and integrity of leagues, and the players that play within those. There is talk of how having sort of collegiate level esports is a way to build up players who are mentored by coaches, and can be solid representatives of esports as one avenue of that. I think in terms of like the financial side of things, we want to make sure that we have good metrics, and I think the esports industry is working on that. I heard that the Overwatch League is currently partnering with Nielsen right now for their numbers, and it's tricky because I think currently the metrics that are used to measure viewership of esports is measured a little differently from traditional sports. So I think having good metrics and solid reporting can help investors in terms of their confidence levels and how much they want to invest.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking on it, I think my biggest concern is sort of transparency and accuracy in numbers that are reported. I think if sponsors, which are really the ones propping this up and helping this growth, and investors too, are getting numbers that are not accurate, and especially those blue chip sponsors that are sponsoring like leagues like the Overwatch League or League of Legends, if they're getting numbers that are not accurate and they're not getting a return on their investment and they pull out, that hurts the industry moving forward. And so I think making sure that those numbers that they're being sold are accurate and that they're getting a good return on their investment so they continue to invest in this industry and in these leagues, I think that's really important, and that's my concern.
I think so. For me, I think esports is in this like really big rush to like compete with each other. So like League of Legends, they want to say their league's the best. Overwatch League, like we want to say our league's the best. NBA 2K League wants to say their league's the best. I don't know why we as an industry like got there so quickly, but for me, I think like we all started as having this common love of like our video games as a whole. And we should all be like rooting for the success of each other's leagues as well. And so I think having an industry that wants to compete with the leagues within it is in a hurry is a little bit of a mistake in my opinion.
I would say like time and context. I think a lot of times we compare the Overwatch League or something like that to the NBA, but what we should be doing is comparing the Overwatch League in year 3 to the NBA in year 3. Right. And I think it's unfair to the NBA has been around for 100 years or so. And I think it's unfair to kind of, put those two things together and trying to compare them. Somebody recently, I think it was Jason Lake recently said, like, we're building skyscrapers here and we're literally like on the first floor. So, it's time. We have to allow this investment to build. And, if you're consistently not looking at the context of things and comparing today versus, or today instead of actually where we are in the industry, there's going to be issues.
And the final question, and hopefully this will be filed under the news you can use category for the audience, but Josh, we'll start with you since your business is actually a great example of this. If you're coming at esports and the esports industry as an outsider, where do you find the esports industry to be underserved? What are the opportunities to get into the market that you can take advantage of at this juncture?
I would say, look from the bottom up. Look at what we're doing, youth, look in your community, and also do what you are good at. Like right now, the coolest thing is that I looked around and the game gym didn't exist, and so I created it. If you want to be, the Joe Buck and Troy Aikman of esports, like start now. Mm-hmm. And with that time, you will become those people. And I think that, the more that if you're a content creator, you should be creating content now. If you're doing all this stuff, it should be now. And then that plus time, you're going to be in a really good spot. So I would say, look look at the industry, learn about the industry, and then you could pick and see places where there are those gaps. I think a lot of people jump in before they actually do the research, and then they end up unsuccessful.
Yeah, I think no matter what you do, please don't go start another tier 3 or tier 2 org. We just don't need another one of those. Yeah, for me, it's collegiate, and really it's creating the next like generation of people who are going to work in the industry. So I use myself as this example. I did every single thing wrong getting into this industry. I was a neuroscience major, which has absolutely no applicability whatsoever. I did not have like any valuable internship experience, like everything wrong, but it worked out. I think for me, we get inquiries all the time where it's, how do I want a job, I want to do this. And it's like, okay, but what have you done? Right. And we're like so many years past oh, I love video games. I played, GoldenEye when I was growing up, right? Like, okay, cool. But like, have you built a tournament? Have you ever adminned? Have you like produced a live stream before? Have you just done something? And so for me, it's like, I'm slightly skeptical of like a lot of the esports programs out there for colleges right now. I'd love to see like the next actual accredited program that spits out, 10 qualified people to go work at esports teams for the next, 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, I hate agreeing with everyone on the same panel, but I basically like the youth pipeline mentorship development is a really important thing. I mean, I mentioned that we have the number 1 pick in the 2K League draft. We're most likely going to draft an 18-year-old kid. I mean, that's just what the draft prospects look like. And there's not the same pipeline to pro for the 2K League that there's in the NBA. The NBA, you're a top high school prospect, you're going to go play college ball. And then you're a top college ball player, you're going to make the draft. And you're sort of prepping for that for several years, whereas we're going to draft a kid who's probably 18 years old, who maybe has never left the city he's grown up in, and we're going to move him to DC, and he's going to expect to be a professional making, pretty good money and expect to be, an adult like that. And so we're working with our Monumental basketball program and John Thompson III to kind of develop a onboarding and player development process. But we have serious concerns about getting an 18-year-old kid here because there just isn't that development pipeline at the youth level to that we can rely on.
Andres?
I think my colleagues covered it pretty well, but it'll be interesting to see what happens sort of on the college level too in terms of development.
All right. With that, we should turn it over to the audience here. Do we have a microphone, Liz, or do we just have to be loud? Oh, all right, terrific. Just raise your hand, and someone with a mic will come over and find you. And I will remind you to say your names. All right, just right in the blue shirt right there, since you're closest to the mic there.
Thank you. My name's Stuart Trafford. I work for Magic Leap, an augmented reality company. Very curious with 5G coming online. All these events are on 2D screens. Are you looking at advancing that to an AR environment anytime soon?
I guess as the resident event hoster, I'll take that one. No, I would love to. I think the idea of like translating like a game of Overwatch or inserting someone like onto the field while they're experiencing the match would be incredible. Like if you guys want to get started on that now, call me after this and we can chat. But yeah, I think for right now, at least for this season, it'll be kind of a standard broadcast experience.
Right down in front in the purple sweater. Microphone.
Hi, I'm Mindy Reiser. I do not know this world at all, so I approach it with a kind of innocent eyes. But what strikes me is the total absence of women. Look at what we got here, 4 guys. We had a lawyer earlier. In terms of the gym, I'd be curious about who comes there. And I'm also curious about the cross-generational business. We've talked about the challenge parents faced. What about grandparents who are even more remote from this world? And also curious about the demographics in terms of different ethnic groups and educational levels of the folks who are involved in these worlds. So a lot of demographic questions. I'm a sociologist by trade, so maybe this explains this.
So at the Game Gym, it's mostly primarily male. And I think that the reason you're seeing that is that we've not invested in women and supported women in the gaming community for the past 20 years. Now that we're woke, we are like, why isn't everybody inclusive? Well, we haven't fostered that community. So one of the things that we've done, my first hire was a woman. Her name is Maya Kushner. She's a brilliant lawyer who works in DC and is also a fantastic League of Legends player. And I think that what we need to do is give young women mentors. We need to support them. We need to create inclusive communities. And unfortunately, the gaming community really hasn't done that the last 20 years. So what we're doing, and I think what the steps that we're all trying to take by who we hire, the content that we create, and the other things, is try to make that community more inclusive. And what we'll see in the next 10, 20 years is the result of that work. So I think it's it's unfortunate that, we're like, well, why isn't it now? And it's like, well, we didn't do the work to get to that good point. You asked a couple questions. Yep. For grandparents, we do the same things. Everybody is fully capable of learning esports. You just need to take the time. I compare it to typing. You have to tell your brain to tell your fingertips what to do. And when you learned how to type, you typed "the lazy dog jumps over the brown fox" 1 billion times. It's the same thing with a controller or mouse and keyboard. And so everybody is fully capable of doing that. It's just, do you invest in that time? So whether it's a grandparent or a parent, everybody can understand our world. It just takes the effort to do it. And then in terms of demographics and things like that, the whole world is interested in esports. The whole world here, especially in Potomac, we have access to everything. All of our kids have computers and tablets and things like that. The rest of the world usually sees things on their phone. So when I was in grad school, they said global, mobile, social. And those are the things that I think are really going to drive things forward. And so mobile gaming is becoming very big around the world. So you'll see, you'll see those demographics start to expand. But unfortunately, high-powered gaming PCs are pretty expensive. So it does limit some of those demographics. And I'll pass it off to these guys.
Yeah, just to echo what Josh said. So gaming hasn't really been an inclusive space for a long time now. I think some publishers have done a better job than others in kind of policing the online environment, Blizzard being one of them. Overwatch actually has the highest diversity of any professional esports league in terms of how many females are actually playing the game on a daily basis. For us at the professional level, we as an organization see that as a really kind of important point. We had the first female assistant coach on our roster last year, and we actually have the first female GM this year in Annalyn. So we're really excited about both of those points. And then also, I think just what Josh said, accessibility is the biggest thing that kind of prevents diversity, right? So if you look at the average high-end gaming PC costs between $1,500 to $2,000. You see games that are played on console have a lot higher division of diversity. So a game like NBA 2K, where you need an Xbox that costs $400 and a copy of the game for $50, is far more accessible than a game like Overwatch or League of Legends, where you do need that higher end PC. And so you see regions like Korea where you can go into a PC Bang and spend $2 for 20 hours of play. A lot of people do that, and then you have a lot of North American and EU players who can afford the PCs, and that's how they kind of filter down into games like League and Overwatch.
All right, can we jump to another question just in the interest of time? Along the wall there in the back.
Great panel, you guys. My name is Derek Higgins. By way of background, I'm a traditional sports guy, having worked at the National Football League for a number of years, and then actually working for Ted when I ran AOL Sports a number of years ago. So primarily for Grant and for Andrew, anybody else can jump in. So that sponsorship primarily has driven revenue over the last few years. How do you guys look to model your business for the next 5 years, given sort of what you know or don't know about some of the other areas in terms of media and how, and the growth of those opportunities for you, as well as just general gate, et cetera, et cetera?
For us, I think we're really just taking kind of a short-term approach to it. I mean, right now, like I said, pretty much all of our revenue is sponsorship revenue. So our goal is to make sure that our sponsors are getting the return on their investment in continuing to come back and invest in our programs, while kind of simultaneously looking at the landscape and how it's going to develop and what other revenue opportunities will pop up, as we look to, follow like the Overwatch League model where we have home games in DC and we can pursue ticket sales. If there's opportunities for sort of media rights at a local level, outside of sort of the national level, and increasing merchandise sales and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a short-term approach with kind of a long-term view down the road.
For us, it's very much like a league to team relationship on a lot of those topics, right? So the league negotiates media rights. Overwatch League had some of the best media rights the past 2 years with Twitch, and is currently out in renewals for those. They have a global merchandising deal with Fanatics, so we reap the benefits of that. MTX sales for in-game items from the league passes down to teams. I think we collectively, as franchises within the league, do a lot of work with the executive team of Blizzard in how do we optimize those returns for us, how do we optimize those returns for the league overall, and then for the items that we can control, like local team sponsorship and ticketing, those are the areas that we work kind of the hardest on, since obviously we have the most control over them.
All right, we have time for one more question before break. Right there in the blue sweater. You were first. Congratulations.
Hi, thanks. I'm Rebecca Koenig. I'm a reporter with EdSurge, which is an education publication. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about how the endemic culture of gaming affects and reacts to these attempts to professionalize and monetize it. For example, it sounds like something Josh is working on. Is gaming inherently like a big social activity that you know how to do with other people in public, or is it more of something you've done by yourself, or you kind of watch streaming alone? Is it receptive to women, to girls? Like, it's one thing to reach out to girls, but is that really something that the culture will take? How do athletes like being told what they can and can't say on streaming? So I'm just kind of curious what the culture is like and how that affects your work trying to make money off of this.
Whenever you kind of professionalize something, there's always people who buy in and reap the benefits and people who don't. And I think that, there's people who really struggled when the Overwatch League first came out with some of the things that they were saying and doing and things like that, and they got booted from teams. And the league went on and they did not. And so, the people who buy in, they will reap the benefits. I think that when it comes to providing those opportunities, the things that we do, as soon as you walk in the game gym door, our rules are like, you accept everybody, there's no discrimination, there is no this, there's no that. And so setting that precedent and having all of our community buy into that is an amazing thing. So, we while the numbers of women who come through our door are still low, they're still treated as everyone else is when they do. So I think the main thing is about the people who do have the power and do have the voice setting that precedent. And it's what everybody wants. I don't think anybody wants a not inclusive, toxic community. So I think that the more that we, as a whole, group everybody together and kind of provide a unified front, the better the whole industry will be, and the future generations will then have amazing opportunities that women and people of color didn't have now and in the past.
Yeah, and I will say that the NBA 2K League in its second season did have one female player. She was by the name of Chiquita. She was drafted by Warriors Gaming Squad, the Golden State Warriors NBA 2K League team. And if you watch the draft from last year, the reaction in the room from when she was drafted by the other players was incredibly supportive. I mean, everyone was really happy for her. And so I think, most athletes, top-level athletes don't care who you are as long as you can play. It doesn't matter, race, religion, gender, any of that. If you can play, you can play. The top players just want to win. And so I think that's the most important thing, and that will welcome anyone to participate in these top leagues.
All right, well, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for the wonderful questions, and thank you for the answers, panelists.
Thank you.